Hi, I'm Dr. Anjana Katwa. I'm an earth scientist, an author, and a presenter, and you're listening to the Coffee and Geography podcast. So grab yourself a brew and enjoy the listen.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Coffee and Geography podcast. And I have someone on here who I have been following for quite a while, not met as often as I would like in person, but we finally got to sit down and chat, despite the fact they're not in the UK at the moment. He's in Vietnam. Cyrus Golding, how are you doing?
Hi, Kit. I'm doing very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on. Likewise, really great that we've got some chance to catch up, talk geography and other bits and pieces. Yeah, I'm in Vietnam, where I support some different, having worked out here as a deputy head for a bit of time, and I pop out here reasonably often to work with different schools as well.
That's incredible. And I can't believe that the first time we actually kind of physically saw each other in person was at the Geography Teacher Educators Conference this year, which was I've even forgotten where it was now. Manchester. Yes, Manchester. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
all right, let's introduce you. Yeah, we'll introduce you so people know why you're on the podcast. So this is Dr. Cyrus Golding, a senior teaching fellow at the University of Southampton, including leading the Geography PGC course, and that stands for Postgraduate Certificate in Education, for you folks who are not familiar with that acronym. Cyrus is also the founder and director of Golding Education, which is a global consultancy company supporting the setup and development of international schools, working with CEOs and school groups who want new kinds of education fit for the 21st century. He's a geographer by training and did his PhD on rethinking natural hazards in Iceland. Oh, that's going to be a good chat. And now applies a geographical lens to educational problems by exploring how we can take practical steps to make schools and curriculum more sustainable, not just environmentally, socially as well, into the future. That's lovely. Yeah, quite a rich kind of bio there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, question to start with, as we always start with in this podcast series, is that you're not at home, you're not in the office in Southampton, but you're over in Vietnam. So what have you managed to grab in terms of a brew today? Is it just a hotel cup of tea, hotel coffee, or?
As usual, I can't make up my mind, so I've got a coffee and a tea and a bottle of water. So I've got all sorts.
Oh no, we're talking shop too much. So Cyrus, The one thing I'm absolutely delighted that I'm getting to talk to you now, because I think you've got a really, really fantastic, interesting kind of geographical identity, which I'm really, really interested to talk about. So you are based in Southampton at the moment, and the University of Southampton. So tell us then, Cyrus, so in terms of your geographical identity then, so you're living in Southampton, you've got where you've been, where you've grown up, you've got your heritage as well. What makes Cyrus today in terms of your geographical identity, and how has it informed kind of like the way that you are? It's a big question, and you can start however you like with the most visceral kind of reaction to a place that you've got, if you so wish.
It's a great question. I guess I'm orientated by the problems that I'm interested in. I'm interested in issues of social justice, inequality, lack of access, or inequality to access of education, uneven impacts of natural hazards, whatever dimension that is, as it's reflected by the way that people experience it. So rather than a sort of top-down approach, I'm much more interested in a deep ethnographic experience of the way that people go about their lives. So the way that I'm a geographer is very much a kind of qualitative geographer. As you said, I did my PhD looking at the way communities in Iceland experience natural hazards, and spending a long time living with people on a small island called Heimaey, which is itself a volcano, which erupted in 1973. And this island was very much kind of, well, the volcano happened, nothing's happening now. But when you live with people, you, A, realize the way that they are affected by the geology of the place, and two, how that happens long after all the official hazard management has moved out. So the thesis I was drawing and was really, if you take the view of individuals and look at the way they're experiencing hazards, it's very different from the way that hazard management and policy deals with it. And of course, that's the way we talk about it in school geography, is actually a reflection of the way that post-World War II hazards were viewed, which is a bit like a nuclear disaster. You know, something big happens or catastrophic, it usually has a very instant impact, and then you respond to it afterwards. But actually, if you actually look at the way geophysical hazards play out, very rarely do you even get something like that, even with a volcano, which we tend to think of as quite similar to that kind of event. I could go on, but yeah, those are the broad principles.
So in terms of your identity, then, would you say, is there any kind of Icelandic kind of part of your being, part of your identity now that you've kind of picked up, brought back with you, or and that's mixed up with any other part of that? Because that's kind of like when I say geographical identity, it's almost like not just kind of how you fit in with place, but almost how place comes back with you, if that makes any sense.
No, it absolutely does. That idea of who you are is shaped by actually the way that place has impacted your body. So I was born and grew up in Manchester. I absolutely love geography at school, but I have a hybrid identity. My actual sort of ethnicity is half Iranian, half Ukrainian, obviously two very important geopolitical flashpoints right now. When I was younger, very few people knew where Ukraine was really, and probably the same about Iran, and now, of course, very important. So my own identity was a hybrid, and then I found geography equally as interesting because of the science and then the sort of social science and the more humanities dimension. And I found that it kind of spoke to my interest of being interested in a lot of different things and being interested in the real world. As I went to my undergraduate, I was more of a physical geographer. My research was actually about moss and the way volcanic ash influences the growth of moss on lava fields, very specific. And over time, I became much more interested in theory and really bringing in more of the philosophical dimensions of what's happening in sort of the cutting edge of modern human geography and philosophy to think about environmental problems. Who I am, that idea of social justice is not only where I was brought up, but it's also the struggles of my ancestors and the people who came before me, and the way that my grandparents had to struggle when they were first-generation immigrants in this country, was not too in the too distant future that continues to inflect on my interests in the present.
That's really, really fascinating, because that's such a well, yeah. I mean, current geopolitical issues aside, but if we were to kind of like look at that holistically, we're thinking, yeah, what has been the geopolitical processes behind any kind of disaster? Now, I'd love to hear your views on this. I am of an opinion where there is no such thing as a natural disaster. For instance, there's only natural hazards, natural processes, and then humans who, as you've just said, because of historical and, the way that we've interacted with nature, have turned things into a disaster. So I'm a big proponent of what Professor Ilan Kelman, who I've had the privilege of meeting and talking to a few times about this. And so I'll tease that a bit about for us, so you've got Iceland, which, correct me if I'm wrong here, Cyrus, but it seems to me that you don't really hear much about disasters in Iceland, because they seem to be in more of a synergy, and they seem to manage the situation, the fact that they live on a volcanic island, they're right on the mid-Atlantic ridge. However, when you go to other places, maybe, perhaps it's because of the level of development, it's, knowledge, resources, all that kind of stuff, but you have a very similar situation elsewhere, and it's a complete disaster sometimes. So I don't know. That's just a thought that's just come to the top of my head. I mean, the only disaster we heard of from coming out of Iceland was when Eyjafjallajökull, erupted, and then it didn't really do much in Iceland, but it closed down Europe's airspace and caused problems over here. We were the ones having the disaster. They were like, this is normal. So yeah, I'd like to hear your opinion on that.
Well, it speaks to the thesis, which is, Eyjafjallajökull was a very precise moment And it kind of fitted with the sort of military model of big events, shocking, surprising, tended to be over within a couple of weeks. A lot of the hazards that Iceland does have, which are the ongoing rumbling of different volcanoes, Bardarbunga, which was a world, at the time, a huge lava flood event, the events that are happening or were happening in Grindavik with the fissures there, don't really fit the model that we tend to think about in geography of big event, surprising moment, even though people were moved out. So it speaks to that thesis that, well, if it doesn't fit what we tend to think of as a hazard event, it's not either reported by the media or something that geographers naturally are used to fitting into their schema.
True. Yeah, that's a good point. And when I was a teacher, I would say I was very much guilty of that. It's those big events. And yet, it's those, and again, another thing that Elon Kelman kind of coins is the term slow disasters. It's not those big newsworthy events, like the Boxing Day tsunami in 2004, the Eyjafjallajökull, in 2010, and et cetera, the Tohoku earthquake. They are massive events that shock you and get those. But what about those slow disasters? Not just because they happen over time and they're gradual, but because they have been hundreds and hundreds of years in the making. Because of colonialism, because of destruction of habitats, usurping and removal of indigenous stewardship and knowledge and peoples. That's what we mean by slow disasters. I think that stuff really is what geographers should be looking at.
Mm-hmm. And actually, there is more and more of that focus on Rob Nixon, on slow violence, and the philosophy, I feel, really has helped us understand, bring new tools to bear on these topics, whether it's air pollution or it's land degradation, the kinds of issues which are slow, attritional, insidious, emotional, mental, physical impacts on human bodies, often racialized in the sense of uneven impacts on minorities and race and black and brown people. So it's totally that lane of thinking which I'm interested in. The idea of disasters as socially constructed, I don't think is new. I think that's actually, probably several decades of thinking in geography, but we tended to think of those hazards as socially constructed because people who are from developed countries or poorer countries are more impacted because of lack of preparedness or investment and so on, therefore they're impacted more. The way that I think we've now thinking about that's still completely valid, but it's thinking they are also material and they impact the body and they shape the body. Like you were saying about my own identity of the past, how does that shape the body for generations to come in a more of that feminist sense that the body is changed over time, and that sort of feminist corporal type philosophy helps us think about. So yeah, that was a starting point really for the sort of philosophical approach to geography. But since my PhD, I've been involved in teaching geography, working in teacher education since 2020 at King's College London, with some incredible colleagues. We started Roots, which is an incredible journal, which many of your listeners will have read and hopefully contributed to. And I think that speaks to this idea that young people should have a voice and they should be empowered on an equal level. So you can, if you start changing my sort of work forward, you can kind of see some of the thinking start to play out.
That's amazing. I just want to go back and pick up just kind of like when you mentioned about feminism. I almost every single chat I have on this podcast series, I have some kind of like self epiphany, like, oh my God, that's why this is, I'm thinking, and you were talking about the way you talked about feminism, and now I realize that even way before, like, I realized I was transgender and I socially transitioned and things like that, why I was a feminist beforehand. Like, I didn't become a feminist, just now that I identify as I do. And that's really struck me what you said, that really is a feminist ideal, isn't it? About, obviously, I already knew about bodily autonomy and stuff like that, but like kind of that, yeah, oh, that was so profound. Thank you for that. And then coming back into back to what you said about roots, I think this is absolutely fantastic. Now, there's a lot of people listening who aren't familiar with the Roots Journal. So I think this is a great opportunity to kind of talk about something that really, really, I know you want to love to talk about that. And let's build in roots into that, right? So what you've said here, you say geography is focused on problem solving, brings together bits of different disciplines to focus on issues that affect different people. Yeah, that's why we all love it, right? It's a bridging subject, one of hybridity, invites a broad church of approaches, and you love that about the discipline. So and you know, like I was like you, I was a physical geographer to start with, you know, also all the weather, all the climate, you know, all that kind of stuff. And now a lot of my work today is all about the human vulnerability and climate justice and stuff like that. So that's round about saying. So let's start with the Roots Journal. What is it all about, and how does it embody? Because I know it does. How does it embody this thing that you love about geography? That it's hybridity, that it's bridging, and it just brings together all these rich ideas for all these young minds.
So Roots was made in 2020 by me and Professor Lizzie Rushton, who is now at Stirling in education. We came together over the idea that there needs to be more validating of young people's experience and knowledge, and that knowledge to be treated with the right amount of equality, if you like, as the kind of canonical knowledge that geographers and geography educators always turn to, which tends to be a small number of people who've written textbooks. And we thought, well, actually, the quality of work that sixth form geographers and undergraduate geographers and postgraduate geographers produce, there's too much of a peer-reviewed barrier to and a timeline for them to actually be able to say they've published anything, even though it's excellent. So we galvanized through social media a group of amazing educators and academics who became the peer reviewers. So they are the quality check on everything that's submitted by students. But it's not just a quality check, it's really a kind way of giving feedback that aspires to excellence of every single piece. So if you're a student in the sixth form and you submit something, you get two amazing people who are in the geography community giving you that detailed feedback that might be the first time you've ever had that sort of expertise at that level. And it can go back and forward several times, and eventually we'll publish it and you can say you are a peer-reviewed author, and you can write about that on your UCAS statement or use it for your master's application, or just say, for the pure joy of it, you've contributed to geographical knowledge.
It's so good, yeah. And tell me about the kind of things where, I mean, again, to kind of illustrate this whole different disciplines. And it's completely free to go and have a look at and everything, folks. Go and have a look at it. I'll put the link in the description. But I'll bring it up now. So just give me an idea from your experience when you've been involved, if you've seen this, the kind of things you see submitted and how that kind of demonstrates that this interdisciplinary nature of geography.
I mean, if you look at what's produced from children who go to state schools to international geographers, a lot of it is about their own life and experience. What's it like as them in their embodied personas in their town or in their where they live. So it validates that kind of knowledge, that my own experience actually is geographical knowledge in a way that we don't tend to see too much of, and we should. So we see a whole spectrum of really personal. It can go from poetry and book reviews to really sort of more typical academic style journal articles, especially as you get older, about nuclear weapons, to Johnny and Liam, who are the new editors-in-chief, who've been actually not so new anymore, but they've just published a new issue on rewilding in geography. So you can see here, small island sustainability. This is what young
50-minute cities, are they worth it? Yeah.
Look at the quality of Uyghurs in queer geography. And we really encourage this idea of bringing your own self and your own interests to whatever you want to write about, but showing that it's academic. So we've got loads of pieces on queer and LGBT geography, on race and ethnicity, on combining different concepts, theoretical and physical. It really is a huge celebration of what young, or not always young, but geography students are interested in a phenomenal way. And as you said, Kit, there's no paywalls, free to access, free to use in your classroom if you're a teacher, free to direct your students to, and that's part of the philosophy.
Yeah, and I'm currently writing a paper with the wonderful Jessica Newbury-LeVay at University of Oxford, who was involved in the Compass project, and another output, folks, you need to read if you're interested in stuff. And so right here, we've got an undergraduate student, James Swallow at the University of York. Urgency, not anxiety, effective educating about climate change to empower action, avoid distress, which is perfectly up the street of the kind of work that I'm doing. So, and I am someone who keeps saying we need to listen to young people, we need to advocate their voice. They are, and yet, so if I don't utilize, things like this, then I'll call myself out as a hypocrite, So look at this. This is absolutely fantastic, and this. So yeah, because we're audio only today, folks. But yeah, look at this. So just read out a few of these. A hidden rabbit warren, permafrost, and the challenges of its thaw. By Mercy Sainsbury at Trinity Sixth Form Academy and in partnership with University of Cambridge. What a fantastic thing that these kids are getting. I'll always say that being an ex-teacher. And this is okay. This is interesting. See, I would definitely use this because I'm based in Norfolk and Suffolk. If I was still teaching, I'd say, look, someone had written this from a school, investigating the causes of coastal recession and consequences of shoreline management plan policies at Coverhive, Suffolk. And I tell you what, Cyrus, if this existed back, you will remember this. So folks, back in the day, when we had so many reforms, education reforms in the United Kingdom, and one of the reforms we had in assessment was to bring coursework into something called a controlled assessment, which is where we still do coursework, but it was almost under exam conditions. You still go out, do your field work, et cetera, but then the write-up of it had to be done in quote unquote exam conditions. It was a flawed model. We made it work at the school I taught at. It worked very, very well. And I tell you what, Cyrus, the quality of some of the things that my students, my GCSE, so that's like 15, 16-year-old students, folks, produced in those controlled assessment years was absolutely phenomenal, to the point where the exam board would actually say, Kit, in our exam report, our assessment report, which we give out to schools to say, here are high quality, can we use your kids' work as an example of high-level geography? And these are not superstar kids of, always at straight A stars, or at the time as it was, these were just kids who really got into the geography, the local place-based geography, and their stuff would grace things like the Roots Journal. And if only this existed like 10, 15 years prior, but I'm so glad it exists now. Let's put it that way.
Thanks, Kit. And look, we want people to access it, use it, share it. And you're absolutely right. It does place that extra onus on us as those people with privilege and power in certain dimensions to go that bit further. And, if we really talk about thinking about knowledge and whose knowledge matters, and we just talking about it is one thing, but do we spend that extra 5 minutes looking for what a student has written? Well, actually, why don't we? Because we start trying that tiny bit harder with what we can do. So look, it's there. We are so lucky that I think we've had over probably close to 100 articles now, with many hundreds of peer reviewers and editors. I will say at this point, thank you to Johnny and Liam, who've done an incredible job as the editors-in-chief for some time, and Indeed. Everybody who been part of it.
Yeah, and of course to our mutual good friend, Dr. Lizzie Rushton, as well, because who you work with very, very closely with, and who's been a huge supporter of the, and encourager of the work that I do, and it's just that yeah, and I think what's great about like the fact that you two, the editors in chief, you just had that. Whereas someone like me, scatterbrained me, I'll be like, I've got this idea, like this is the kind of thing that I would love to have seen happen. And I was always like, wouldn't it be so great, so great, so great? And I get so lost in the weeds, cognitively lost in the weeds about, how good it would be, how good it would be. And I never would have either at the time, I never really had the ability, to start that thing up, or the privilege to start that bit up. So I just want to say thank you for, as you just said, taking the privilege that you do have through being connected in academia, being in ITT, initial teacher training, all that kind of stuff, and say, well, people like me and Dr. Lizzie are in a position to set this up. to give these students these voice, that because some of the best ideas come from people, still young enough to have that freedom of thought and innocence.
Yeah, and one of the things you will see is that actually it's now 6 years old, and me and Lizzie are not the face of it. We talk about it and we promote it, but actually this is a journal which outlasts us, and it was designed that way. It doesn't have our face picture on the front,
Yeah.
The next cohort of editors-in-chief and the next, that we built it to sort of have that structure, which means it's bigger than both of us. So fingers crossed. And, if anybody is listening and wants to be involved, go and take a look.
Yeah.
It was never the Cyrus and Lizzie project. It was always about what I actually think was the right decision.
But you enabled it. You were the ones who kickstarted it, so and folks, and you know what? I mean, it might already be happening now for all I know, but I can just now picture some of those youngsters who contributed when they were at sixth form or something like that, and now they come back and then they're an editor, they're a peer reviewer, they're someone that's saying, look, go back into volume 1 edition, issue whatever. That's me. I was 17 at the time, and now I'm in my late 20s. I'm now doing this, and that'd be amazing.
The impact, we looked at a few individuals, and we could, they told us the impact it had on them. But anyway, so that's we're very proud of it, and grateful to everybody who trusted it too. But I think if we talk more broadly about geography and expertise, a lot of the work that I've moved into now and my interests are about thinking around AI in education and what that will do. And I think it links quite nicely with Roots, because there will always be a route, if you like, for quality academic production. It's not about the outcome, it's about the way it was assembled. And that, I think, is the kind of thing which will, even though AI is, of course, improving rapidly, has a certain human quality of care that is not easily reproducible with AI.
Well, if you give us an example, then I mean, it's for us geographers, it's almost, we always kind of joke that we've got this X-ray vision, we're able to take a lump of cheese and somehow, link it to a ballpoint pen or something like that at some point down the line, But I don't know, get people saying, "Kit, go on then." But so give us a specific example, maybe which you have either demonstrated or had one of your trainee teachers come back to and say, well, this is an example where you've got two issues, which on the surface, they seem completely unrelated, but you've got that geographical link for it. So maybe perhaps something that, that I don't like saying the layman, because I think everybody has expertise through interest, right? But that say who people who would consider themselves non-geographers would say, I didn't realize, but yeah, that makes total sense in terms of the geographical link between X and Y.
So I think that this comes to that kind of question which geographers ask themselves: is everything geography, and what does it matter? For me, it's what work is it doing? So if you're drawing a connection between two seemingly disparate things, you can do it. But geographers, we don't ask, can we do it? We ask, well, what impact is that making on the world, and for whom? If you draw the connection of the supply chain between your phone and the rare earth mining in China, then that starts to make visible the invisible supply chain of labor that is part of that. And that's interesting. But if you're just drawing a line between a network of different things, well, why? And what's it doing for whom and to what effect? So that's the bigger contextual question that geographers think about when we think about our knowledge and why we produce certain knowledge, because it reproduces certain ideas in the world that draw attention to certain issues and ignore others.
I think, and it is a bit unfair to say, look, let's try and link. I mean, for those listeners who are old enough to do the Bob Monkhouse thing, where you can link one word to another through a chain of less than so many things. But you're right, absolutely right. It's a case of taking two things which might seem separate and say, well, what is the story and the journey between two? What questions do they bring up? What does this mean for different kinds of people? It's what colleagues like, the wonderful Margaret Roberts would say, how do we approach this in a geographical reasoning, geographical inquiry way? It's how you get there, not what that link is. It's absolutely, and it's just that way of thinking, which seems to be, I wouldn't say it's unique, of course, but it just seems to be inherently geographical. And it is one of the things I think it's a superpower anyway. I will say that.
Yeah, there is something very special about geography. And, I'll mention AI again. I mentioned it before. Because I'm having lots of conversations with people about AI and, what does that mean for the curriculum with changes in the graduate market, with changes in what skills will become valuable in the future, valuable in a monetary sense, not because they're inherently, good. And I think geography and its that sort of synergy and problem solving is a template for the way other disciplines may orientate themselves in the new world of problems or issues that concern humans, or technology that brings together assembles lots of different subjects as a sort of genuinely new template for reorientating knowledge in the future.
That kind of brings me a thought or an interesting question. Do you therefore think, of course, we know as geographers, there's never any kind of like black and white into the issues. It's not even shades of grey. It's a kaleidoscope, in colour and everything. So I see quite a lot now of teachers, and including geography teachers, who are treating AI as a black and white. Well, is it good or bad? Is it environmentally friendly? Can it, that kind of stuff. And I just think, well, that seems to be missing the point, that kind of approach. That's not critical thinking. That's not geographical inquiry. So yeah, I think for the really, the challenge that AI is bringing us, I think there's such a rich base for us geographers to really get behind exactly what's going on, how it could change, how did we get here, the ways. So yeah, I just want your thoughts on that, because I think there are too many going too close into the black and white approach of what AI is, good or bad. And I'm not giving my opinion on whether it itself is good or bad. That's again for another debate and much more nuanced. But just your thoughts on that, really.
My feeling is that generally the community of educators and leaders are swimming in a series of possibilities. You've got those people who are very interested in pedagogy and thinking about AI and metacognition, AI and what that means for thinking. You've got those people who are interested in what AI is doing to plagiarism and malpractice in the classroom. And generally in the classroom, we're thinking about AI as a chatbot, something that can get close-ish to or closer to human writing. That is like level 0 of where this is going. That's where the level of confidence is generally at. And the most sort of advanced I've seen is, well, AI can make sure humans lean into what we do more, which is lean into human skills. Fine. But, I think as geographers, we've got this we could develop this idea of the geography of AI. What's AI going to do to the economy? What's it going to do to human relations? We're not really exploring that vertical. But 2, we need to move beyond this idea of a chatbot as AI, because it's not, it is, but it's just a language that we communicate with a computer. It's fundamentally going to shift everything in terms of many things in the economy that we could on now, but maybe as a future discussion, it's something where my mind has been very much sort of thinking philosophically about.
Where you get the big news stories on the big events, and this is exactly how I feel that things are being approached like AI. It's like, you say chatbots, or could this be like human, general AI, all this kind of stuff. But actually, and working with climate science and stuff like that, we've actually been using machine learning, artificial intelligence to help spot bias in data, to extrapolate. So say, if, for example, folks, you've got temperature readings across a country, but you haven't got the coverage, right? Because maybe it's in an area, maybe in a country in Africa where you've only got maybe 2 weather stations, right? then you do something called reanalysis. That is actually something you could do that manually, but that actually, if you give that over to machine learning and try to teach the system what a temperature gradient is, all this kind of stuff, and then bring some artificial intelligence, that is a structure we can use to say, well, if the temperature here in this, then it's likely because of the geographical and the landscape and the temperature there is likely to be this. That's reanalysis. So we've had this kind of stuff for a while. It's just this kind of maybe the impact on human operation day-to-day stuff. That's where we're thinking about now. And just something, I've written an anecdote very quickly, Cyrus, because it's my inform your next point. Yesterday, I was dealing with some year 9 students. We were doing a climate action workshop, and then one of the kids actually turned around and said, our school is like so talking about how we shouldn't be using AI, that it's bad, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff, that we shouldn't use it for home, all that kind of stuff. And yet our such and such teacher, is using AI to produce our knowledge organizers and stuff like that. And I'm like, good observation.
Well, look, to your point, Kit, AI is making tasks more efficient, potentially more accurate in some areas. It's not new in every sense. To deny the full use of AI and just talk about it in terms of plagiarism, or we don't use AI, actually, we know there's going to be a crisis, and there is in the graduate market, with young people struggling to get jobs. The one thing that actually AI can do potentially is give young people who are entrepreneurial with AI the skills to create a business using different aspects of AI. Or how can they use it to code or develop a new idea? This is how the economy is shifting. Whether you think it's bad or it's good, it's happening. And I do believe there is a big, important philosophical conversation to think about what isn't changed by AI. That's very much a cultural thing that we should be shaping right now. What do we feel children should have human contact for, and what can AI do and not do? I think is very much up for grabs, and we should have that. But it's happening, and to deny the use of the full functionality of AI for reanalysis and climate models and, as I said, thinking inventively and creatively, well, that's surely doing an injustice to the young people that we're teaching. And full disclosure, folks, I use it in the way that, because I have dyslexia and sometimes I have a lot of trouble getting out what's in my mind, and so there are days when I'm in full flow. I can write and I'm very good. I can make sense of it. There are days when I write things out and somebody will read and go, I have no idea what you're talking about, Kit. Right. So, and I just run it through something like Copilot, and I just say, look, or I dictate into it. I say, this is what I'm trying to say. Help me make sense of this. And I make sure that I check, and I have plenty of times I'm like, that's nonsense. Where the hell did AI get that from? Because I never said that. So I do those cross checks and stuff like that. And the other thing as well is that I just don't have the time to do all the coding and all that kind of stuff that I'm doing to kind of evaluate this data that I'm doing, so, and we don't have anyone in the department with those same skills. So I'll do the code. I've got it wrong. I'll just say, look, what have I done wrong here? So actually that's enhancing my talents, enhancing my abilities. It's not taken away from me. And it's certainly, I can't outsource my way of thinking and my concepts and my intellectual property to someone else's brain. I can't pay them to do what's in my brain. So that's how I utilize it. And I understand, as Cyrus has just quite rightly said, there's this whole ethical, cultural debate about it, which really we do need to have, because I love this chat so much. There's something I want you to do now. Just let's kind of finish on something quite a bit lighthearted with a bit of spilling the beans here, Cyrus, because you said here, your first job after university was a graduate scheme with the world's largest manufacturer of consumer goods, and you were responsible for selling hair gel to Asda. So how did that come about? Yeah, that is true. My first job was taking care of selling hair gel. Just goes to show you geographers can do anything.
Yeah, look where it's led you to now. So I know, but joking aside, like people, ex-students said to me, Kit, well, I'm so stuck getting a job. Like their only thing going is this one wonderful young person who I taught said, I really want to work in the industry. I've got an environmental science degree. I've specialized on energy and stuff like that. But there's only this admin job at this local renewable company. And I said, go for it, do it. Get in there, get your name in there, be proactive, ask to go to this, that, and the other. And now 6 years later, she's one of the managers. You just never know, folks. You never know. Okay, so we're now going to bring this to an end now, folks. So last thing is we're all geographers. I'm going to link you to our previous guest, who was the lovely Dr. Anjana Katwa, the geologist down in Dorset, who sometimes some of you folks might have seen on the BBC. And Anjana Cyrus would like you to talk for 30 seconds about the word flight. So I know you travel a lot, so but anyway, it could be a riff of anything you like. You can take a geographical spin on it, so what you want. You could be very philosophical. It's entirely up to you. The 30 seconds on the word flight is yours, whenever you'd like to start.
A flight can be moving across the world in an aeroplane, or it can also be escaping something as a refugee, potentially. I take a philosophical view of flight, which is this idea of newness. And it comes from Deleuze and Guattari, a philosophy which has really affected and influenced my thinking, which is moving away from the conservative, the thing that's been done before in terms of lines of flight, new opportunities for creation that mean that you produce something new. You don't fit an existing schema. And actually, lines of flight is something you can talk about for anything.
Wow, right. So let me get that, because I want to put that in the description. So lines of flight, and was it author?
Yeah, it's a concept from Deleuze and Guattari, 1,000 Plateaus, I think, which is,
Ooh, okay, thanks for that. Wow, okay.
That book. Yeah, well, you sprung that one on me, Kit.
That wasn't my fault. That was Angela's, Okay. Yeah, but you get to pay it forward now. So for the next person I speak to, what word would you like to give them for 30 seconds?
I am going to give them geopolitics.
Ooh, you know what? It's actually quite rare we get like actual kind of like really core geographical terminology on this podcast. One time I had toenail, for instance, which was fascinating. But geopolitics, let's go with that. And Catherine Owen, the wonderful, lovely Catherine Owen, Jogmum, decided to give the next person Battle of Hastings just because she felt like it. But crikey, that was back in season 1. Cyrus, this has been such a wonderful chat. I wish we could have gone on for a bit longer, but for folks who really, really loved listening to you and would like to find out more about your work, where would be the best place for them to find out more about you or get in touch with you?
Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out if any of this has resonated with you through my Southampton bio page. Please connect. I always look forward to talking with like-minded people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope we get to do that again very, very soon, Cyrus, because I really enjoyed this. And as I say, it's a long time coming. So I can see it getting dark there now in Vietnam out of your hotel window. So it's probably dinner time where you are now, isn't it?
It is.
So I'll let you get cracking with that. Thank you so much again for joining us, Cyrus. It's been brilliant.
Likewise, Kit. Real pleasure to talk and see you somewhere around the world.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Coffee and Geography. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave us a rating or review. It really helps. Some episodes are also available with video, so don't forget to check out the Geogrambling's YouTube channel for more. Stay in the loop by following us and using hashtag CoffeeJogPod on Blue Sky and LinkedIn. That's hashtag CoffeeJogPod, where we share updates on new episodes and upcoming guests. Got a question for a guest? Post it on LinkedIn or Blue Sky using hashtag JogQ Yes, hashtag JogQ and we might just feature it on the show. Keep exploring, keep connecting, and as always, keep geogging.